You were an IRS, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think 12th fail is in the vogue right now. Everybody's talking about it.
Thankfully, my family was very supportive. My wife, my parents were very supportive.
Right.
Siblings were very supportive on that. So essentially, that covered a lot of challenges from that perspective. But I agree that being in civil services, you have a very laid out, secure lifestyle, and then you have worked hard for it. No one has given you on a platter.
Yeah.
But then again, when I think it's more of a spiritual connotation that eventually you have to give up life.
Right.
So giving up job not a big thing, as long as it makes a meaning in your life.
Wow.
So for me, it was a meaningful journey.
Right.
And I'm thankful for whatever learnings we have had. And really, if you ask me that would you do it again, I'll do it over and over again. You can enjoy your meat without hurting animals. If we talk about the larger market sizing of it, is $1.3 trillion of meat industry, next only to the oil industry. We are consuming our protein through animals. We are essentially cooking up the planet. Bird flu, swine flu is becoming endemic. For me, it's all about animals. That's the way I would like to start and end my life.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be back with you in the New Year's 2024. Wishing you all a very happy New Year. We are super excited at Snackfax, to be back with a podcast. We continue to do it on Zoom. We now moved to a physical format. I think, you get to know the people better, get to know the businesses better. I think, given that we are in food, tasting is believing. But I think more than that, I think what goes into businesses, creating those businesses is equally complex and complicated, right? So I think through the course of these conversations, what we're going to do is we're going to bring to you the founders, the geniuses in the founder, and more importantly, what goes into building great brands, right? Today, I have my guest, Abhishek. Abhishek is the founder of GoodDot. He's with me. It's a pleasure to have you with us. How have you been?
Great.
Let's start with that.
Yeah, great. Thanks for bringing me, Ashu, for the inaugural session of your Snackfax. Walk the talk, I believe, right?
Walking and talking.
Walking and talking. All right. Yeah.
So, Abhishek, GoodDot has been one of those stories that everybody's talked about, right? I think one of the most talked brands, when you talk of, startups in the food space, right? Incredible amounts of funding.
Yeah.
You've literally sort of championed the space, right? But before we talk about GoodDot, I really want to talk about, your journey, right? I mean, coming from Bihar, Government of India service, you were an IRS, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And I think 12th fail is in the vogue right now. Everybody's talking about it. But, moving out of that and then starting up, I think it's been incredible, right?
Yeah, it is.
I'd love to start with that.
Yeah, definitely, Ashu. For me, it's all about animals,
Sure.
That's the way I would like to start and end my life. Essentially, if there's one thing which is really driving you is a love for animals.
Sure.
So how do you incorporate that love for animals in the food space? So this is where my struggle as a meat eater came through.
Right.
Till 2013 I would eat meat.
Okay.
But I would also help animals since my childhood.
Sure.
So what happened was in 2003, when I was in my engineering days,
right,
I came across a Dutch government sponsored study on tissue culture based meat.
Interesting.
So you realize that, hang on, you can enjoy your meat without hurting animals. So as a consumer, the seed of interest in plant-based meat or tissue culture-based meat at that moment was sown.
Interesting.
Finally, that when we came with the team, we realized that we can really crack it in the Indian market.
How difficult was it to cross over, right? I think, when you are into when you're into government services, right? And I think especially at that level, it's very difficult to cross over, right?
Yeah.
It takes, there's so much of effort which has gone in, right? I mean,
exactly.
How has that been? I mean, I understand this part of it, right? But I'm sure there are people who would have tried to kick in some sanity in you saying that, listen, what are you getting into? Was there a moment like that?
Many people tried to kick in, yeah.
Right.
So essentially, thankfully, my family was very supportive. My wife, my parents were very supportive. Siblings were very supportive on that. So essentially, that covered a lot of, challenges from that perspective. But I agree that, being in civil services, you have a very laid out, secure lifestyle, and then you have worked hard for it. No one has given you on a platter.
Yeah.
But then again, when I think it's more of a spiritual connotation that eventually you have to give up life.
Right.
So giving up job not a big thing, as long as it makes a meaning in your life.
Wow.
So for me, it was a meaningful journey.
Right.
And I'm thankful for whatever learnings we have had. And really, if you ask me that would you do it again, I'll do it over and over again.
That is amazing. That's very karmic, right? I think that's a very important takeaway for us. I think each one of us. And I think, the interesting part is that the world is getting sensitive about it, right? Abhishek, we're going to move into talking about GoodDot, your journey with plant-based meat. Before we talk about the brand, right, and creating the brand in a complex market like India, something that I want to spend time on.
Yeah.
I want to talk to you a little about what this market is about, right? I think there are enough and more studies that are coming in. There is a view in the West, there is a view in India. There are people who are saying that this is massively growing. Then there are of course a set of people who are saying that the pace is a little it'll take a little more time.
True.
Where are we on the market? Just decode it for us.
So basically, if I have to decode the plant-based meat, I think we have to move away and take a top view approach. Essentially, it's just a food item.
Sure.
It's a food item, and as long as people are alive, they'll eat food. So what are the tick marks for a good food item? It's good taste, good nutrition, and good price point. So as long as any product, including the plant-based meat product, matches all the boxes, I think there's a much larger market.
Interesting.
If we talk about the larger market sizing of it, when and if we will fulfill, is $1.3 trillion of meat industry, next only to the oil industry.
Wow.
And the way we are consuming our protein through animals, we are essentially cooking up the planet. we are seeing all the natural phenomena which is happening, the climate instability. So that's a massive challenge. And the way bird flu, swine flu is becoming endemic. So how do we negotiate this dilemma? And we have to feed people the protein. So I think plant-based meat can fill that gap. But there's a journey to it. So I believe we are going to reach there for sure.
Interesting. I think you bring up a very interesting point. Protein deficiency is something which is a very, very large problem. I think India is becoming the capital of protein deficiency, right? So I think before that, let's talk about GoodDot, right? Right. So I think starting from this research on tissue culture and now sort of almost leading the charts, right, when it comes to the India market, right? And I think each one of us is extremely proud of what you achieved, right? Tell us a little about GoodDot, the journey.
So it's entirely a team effort, Ashu. Like obviously I'm a chemical engineer and we are into plant-based meat. The seed of inspiration was tissue culture-based meat, but essentially we're into plant-based meat. So that's the first thing. Most importantly, you see, let's see how meat is consumed. In most of the format, the larger market sizing of meat is a raw format. People, depending upon whether it's Western or even within India, North India, South India, East and West, people cook their own meat in their own format. So we thought that if we have to disrupt the industry with a for us more ethical alternative, I think we need to match those good points of meat. Raw format, customizable, affordable.
Interesting.
So they have been our benchmark. So
very interesting.
So make it simple. That's what I thought.
Very interesting. What's happening on the India front, right? How is adoption coming through? I mean, like I said, right, there's enough and more talk which is happening. How is that adoption coming in? Would love to know some statistics, right, in terms of how quickly this market expanding. I think GoodDot is not only a tier A brand. I think you've been able to crack through tier 2 and towns as well, right? And you're seeing a lot of traction, right? And my belief is, I think that's one side of the market, which is I think I think a lot of startups usually tend to defer it, largely because of purchasing power and all that. But I think my belief, at least, is that post-COVID, there's a massive aspiration which is there in that market, right? What's been your view of that?
Totally. I think we are possibly the only global company in the space of plant-based protein and meat, which is selling in villages of rural parts of the geography. So we have presence in, interior villages of Bihar, Chhattisgarh, I would say Orissa, Bengal, northeast of India, and people are consuming plant-based meat. So if someone comes up and tell me, looking at maybe a story of some of the Western company like Beyond Meat and Impossible, that there are headwinds in the category, I don't believe that. Because it's very difficult to be, for a premium product, mainstreaming will be difficult. But for an affordable product, I think mainstream is easy.
Very interesting.
So again, going back to the fundamental, if you go with a good tasting product and an affordable price point, I do believe there's a big market. It was there in the past, it is there in the current, and it will be there in the future.
Interesting. Abhishek, I want to talk a little about, you mentioned about affordability, right? And especially when you're talking about tier 2 India, I think you have to sort of talk about affordability, right? I think, in India, that's a very critical point that you have to consider, right? I think a lot of products, there have been products that have done exceptionally well, and then there have been products that have not been able to do very well, largely because of the price points, right? When you talk of plant-based protein, right, and you talk about plant-based meats, for example, as an alternative, right, the larger perception in the market is that you're essentially talking about it's expensive, right? The larger perception, at least, is that, right? Some of the versions that have been available, some international sort of example brands that have been into India, they've largely been at a certain price point, right? And I think the early adopters of that were people who were, traveled abroad, had veganism as a choice and stuff like that, right? So when you talk of consumer markets at that level, right, how important does that become, and where do you play? Would love to understand. And how's competition looking for you? Would love to understand some of that.
So, Ashu, you're right. So essentially, most of the early products, even some of our earlier products also were expensive.
Yeah.
And thereby the early adopters were primarily from the, metro places with, well-traveled with, large disposable incomes. But to have a stickable growth, I do believe, so there's a market, there's a niche market, there's a premium market. Definitely there, but the meaty chunk of the market is in the masses.
Right.
So I believe, and that's a technological challenge. It's not just I can wish, or every company wishes that we undercut poultry by half. We wish, and thankfully it's only for the past 5-6 months. I'll give you a reference point if we talk about numbers. So our first product, the vegetarian mutton replacement was there. So that was priced at around 400-500 rupees a kilogram. So compared with around 600-700 rupees boneless mutton, it was inexpensive than mutton. But then again, mutton is not a very largely, because of its because of its price point.
Absolutely.
Chicken is the most widely consumed. Only 5 months back, we developed a product which is almost half to 1/3 of the cost of chicken. And we're getting great numbers in the B2B space.
Very interesting.
So we are supplying to major players in the international and national space and providing the raw protein also.
Very interesting.
So I think this is where the real game will start.
That is very interesting, right? On that point, Abhishek, I want to talk to you a little about taste, right? So I eat non-veg, right? And there is a certain, it's grainy, you have a certain taste, texture, all of that, right? I think you get hooked onto that, right? I think in a way you're looking at that, right? I have tried a couple of products, right, that have been there. There have been occasions when the product has been very close to the experience, that's one. But I think in your mind, you kind of stuck somewhere, right, that this is, not that product, right? Which I think is an issue. But where is the market on that front, right? Are people very conveniently switching over? What's been the feedback that you've been getting?
So I think this is very interesting, Ashu. I think you are, as an ex-meat eater, I know what you're talking about. I know that these are general, perceptions which play. And food is also very cultural. You have been, having those experiences since childhood. So as the products are being innovated, the strategies are also being innovated. So now our focus is that we are a plant protein company. So think about it, if I give a very great tasting, textured product in a curry or a tikka or a biryani format, and I don't say it's veg chicken or veg mutton. I say it's a great veg protein. You'd love it, right? You'll love it. So my thinking is, as a company, our thinking is, let's look at a soya chunk market, at a soya chop market. So around 3,000 crore annual revenue of just the soya chunk, largely unorganized, and soya chop totally unorganized, 1,800 crore market. So people are not bothered whether it's like meat or not. It's a good tasting, high quality vegetarian product. That's all. So this is where the next level is. So for us, a soya chop or a TVP chunks is a pager via the mobile.
Interesting.
So let's crack that market also.
That is a very interesting point that you highlighted, right? I think this entire transitioning opportunity is phenomenal, right? I think the way people are eating chop around us is surprising, right? I think that's the
and there's no.
I think every vegetarian household is is tripping on it, right? It's phenomenal.
Go to any street of Delhi and you'll have chop. Right. Why is there chop? Where there was paneer and chicken. Because it's affordable.
Interesting.
A chop comes at probably 70-80 rupees a kg. Whereas a paneer will be 350 and the chicken will be 250. So people are willing to pay less for more.
Interesting.
So I think that can be a great playbook for a plant-based.
That's a very interesting point that you highlighted, right? So Abhishek, I want to talk a little about, as soon as you productize this, which is essentially what you've done, right? So from say, like from a raw experience to say a semi-processed or almost like a borderline finished, ready-to-eat product, right? Do you think that's a complex territory? Because the taste and variances in India change very quickly, right? How do you see that, right? Does that put you into a different sort of, that is a different ball game altogether, if you really ask me, right? I think then you are getting into RTOs, for example, returns, you're getting into wastages. The maths just changes, right? How are you looking at all of that, right? I mean, is there an added risk that you've taken in the business? Or this is just to sort of cultivate that culture? This is a smaller end of the business? More marketing is as how you see it? Where are you on that?
In fact, we are hedging the risk by, having both. You know, we have a raw format, we have finished format.
Right.
What is differentiating us from the other companies in the space within India and outside of India is we have an excellent spices strength.
Interesting.
So in fact, you know, we have a subsidiary company which is into spices.
Wow.
Because generally kya hota hai ki you see even in India, why is Maggi popular? Take away the magic masala, it won't be popular.
I agree.
Right? So if you have that strength which can you can couple for a consumer centric product. So there you can educate if people are willing to pay a bit more premium.
Interesting.
Let them have a finished format. If they are looking at an affordability more at a B2B level.
Right.
So we are giving the raw protein also.
Very interesting.
So mixing both, like playing both the games.
I think you know, when you were saying, and I'm also thinking in my mind, right? I think the younger audience today, right? Especially, you know, a lot of couples who've recently got married, you know, both working, dink as we call it, right? No, you know, double income, no kids, right? Also, a lot of youngsters who are now kind of entering workforce outside of home. I think they're looking for a lot of these options, right?
Yes.
And especially when they come from a vegetarian household, they don't want to compromise on the value set, right? And I think for them, a product like this makes a lot of sense, right? That takes me to a distribution question, right? So where are you on that front? You know, are you available on all of 24/7s? And of course, do add the B2B side to it. I think you've partnered with a lot of hospitality players. You know, you are available on all major menus, right? Talk a little about that. I think it'll be interesting.
So we have been very fortunate to have a distribution partner in RCM. RCM is like a direct selling network with around 10,000 stores, primarily in tier 2, tier 3 and villages.
Interesting.
So if you Google it on their website and you go to a Kerala village, we'll be available through their store.
Interesting.
So that's a great advantage we have had, wherein, you know, we operate almost at zero inventory, send them to their warehouse in Bhilwara, and they distribute all across India. So that's a great. Of course, we are on Amazon, we are on selling under our own website. So that's a part of a B2C play. But still a chunk of the sales also happens in RCM.
Interesting.
But B2B, riding on the affordability and versatility of our product, we are getting great traction. So we have just partnered with Barbecue Nation for a pan-India rollout.
Congratulations, that's a big one.
Thank you. Leela Hotel, we have a corporate tie-up. We supply to JW Marriott. We supply to dhabas and street side eateries. So you see the spectrum, right from dhabas up to premium 5-star properties, right from India to say Dubai and US and Australia, we are distributing. So we believe that there is so many opportunities. We need to consolidate all of that.
That's very interesting.
And we are getting those ticks.
I think that's an interesting point, right? I think you talk about international markets. My very firm belief is, right, I look at, you know, the good part about India is that, you know, we have a very large expat population, right? You know, and I think, you know, anything which can almost compete with software export is actually food export, right? And I think it's a huge opportunity. Right? In fact, our finance minister recently made a comment in parliament, right, that, you know, you go to walk into a, you know, a superstore internationally and you find a lot of Indian products, right? I think there's a massive amount of advocacy which has happened. How is that playing out for you?
Great. Ashu, you have
early days, or you matured in the game? Where are you?
We are still in early days, but where we are seeing a traction that right from supplying our protein under a private label play and also a branded play under our own brand. We are opening to both the characteristics. What's most interesting is the focus of the current government on exports of food products.
Interesting.
So we were invited even at the G20 Agri-Tech Summit to talk about the summit on the, you know, sustainability angle of plant protein. In World Food India, again we were involved, where Honorable Prime Minister came to the entire pavilion of plant protein because he's pushing that. So I believe APIDA chairman came to our stall and they have, you know, asking us to go to international events where government will sponsor and reimburse the costs.
That is very interesting.
So I think government of India thinks that it's a very important play for agricultural resource and value addition.
Very interesting.
On the core products,
Very interesting.
So, lot of opportunity.
I think, you know, great times for food businesses in general. I think,
absolutely.
You know, and I think we've never seen this kind of institutionalization and I think practice, you know, post-COVID. I think as a country, we've become a little more conscious and aware, right? So it's an interesting time in that sense.
Imagine government of India has set a target in the next 5 years to reach the agriculture export to $100 billion, right? The base is now $50-60 billion. So going from a $50-60 billion base, which has been created in the past 50 years to 100 billion, they need to enter into new categories. So this is where some of the innovative stuff.
I'm sure it's going to be a very, very interesting one, right? So we have the products, Abhishek. Why don't you tell us a little about that?
So basically, as I said, Ashu, you know, for consumers in India, I think they are looking for easy to use solutions for a more finished format. For example, this unmutton dhaba curry, what we have got. So you just need an oil, everything else is there, including the gravy paste. So you cook it. So I'll give you a very interesting insight. So have you ever, most of us have never looked at the manufacturing date of Maggi.
We've never.
We have never.
I will give it to you. No,
Yeah,
we've never.
I have never looked. But if you buy a frozen or ready-to-eat product, we'll always look at the date.
Right.
And it's like 5-6 months late, you won't buy it.
I agree.
So essentially, when something is cooking in front of you,
Right.
you feel you have contributed and it's fresh.
Right.
So that is why we have curated some stuff where you need to cook it. We could have easily given in a ready-to-eat format.
Right.
But we want your touch, your kitchen, your flame to be incorporated in the product.
Very interesting. I think that's I think an experiential part. I think becomes a big value addition.
And it becomes fresh. Like this is a fresh product.
Correct.
You know? So this is where this curry, and India loves its curry.
Right.
So we have that spices strength. Our spices company has made an excellent product. Same also barbecue tikka. If someone is looking at a more quick protein fix,
right.
I think the masala and the protein is there inside the box. And very interesting, these are non-frozen.
Wow.
So you can supply direct.
That's a big problem.
That's a big problem.
That's a very big problem.
If I have to ship it to say Kerala, I think I cannot. If it's just
I think there's a preconceived notion that you have about frozen, right?
Yeah.
I think half of the India doesn't consume frozen because you've been taught and brought up in a certain way. Frozen
मतलब fresh नहीं होगा.
Fresh नहीं है, correct.
जबकि frozen is fresh, मतलब कोई खराबी नहीं है. मतलब I think that's a myth.
You're right.
That's a myth.
Yeah.
But the problem is हम frozen क्या चलता है? French fry चल जाता है जिसको आप cook करते हो.
हम लोग as a market ज़्यादा complex हो जाते हैं because हमारे अपने preconceived baggages इतने ज़्यादा हैं.
बहुत बड़े.
I think that just makes it very very complicated at a different level, right? But Abhishek, I want to take 2 minutes and I want to spend a little time talking about this international press that is sort of which is there. There's a lot of conversation which is happening, right? I think India as a player has we've largely been a market for a lot of Western companies, right? Where they wanted to come in and sell and all of that, right? When you are actually doing something far more efficiently,
yes,
you're kind of competing with them in their own game,
yes,
almost making it difficult for them to sort of survive because your cost and price
points
are very different.
Yeah,
you are engineering and re-engineering it within your own setups, which are far cheaper from an expense standpoint, right? Because the rates there are very different.
Yeah,
you see a lot of conversation happening, right, which is not necessarily in the right direction,
right?
Where they continue to question the ability of Indian brands to deliver as per international standards, right? And they have a lead because they've established those standards, right? So, it is a complex matter to sort of deal with, right? Now, I know there are no clear answers to that, right? But, in a way, what it does is that it builds a lot of international perception around, what Indian brands have to offer, right?
Right.
And nobody in business wants a preconceived notion of that sort, right? What's your view on that? How do you see that?
So basically, I would say this. First of all, in terms of our strength, so we have a great agricultural resource, right? Think about China, right? Think about say Vietnam or Bangladesh. So if we talk about textile, Vietnam and Bangladesh, you take it Adidas, we name the brands. Everywhere they are making it for them. Made in Bangladesh, made in textiles. Same goes for manufacturing or electronics product made in China. Right. So essentially, they have come up the value chain. Even in our services sector, initially we would do more of a entry-level jobs. Now we are doing more of an advanced level jobs. So same way will operate in the agricultural resource also. Now with the inflationary pressure all across the globe, people are looking at affordable solutions. So private level opportunities are going through the roof, and people are not willing to pay a brand premium. So if say a Walmart or a Costco or a Trader Joe's, they want a set of products to be made in a hygienic conditions, they'll have to come to countries like India. So I think that's a big opportunity out there for the Indian company, not just in the plant-based meat space, but across the food space. So and they are killing it. I think there are a lot of guys who are doing great job providing rice, providing frozen food products and all that. And now coming to the second part of your perception part of it, that will change. The more we are present, it will change. A very interesting anecdote I would like to share, with the audience also. For example, I read somewhere that the Stanford MBA students, they were given, it might be a bit different, but I'm just telling the crux of it.
No, that's all right.
So the Stanford University MBA students, they were asking, okay, you have this 20 minutes presentation time, right? And you will have to, maybe a $10 product sell as much as possible for whatever. So everyone says someone undersold it, someone sold it at 10 for 20, someone sold it at $1,000. And they were asking, what did you do? He said, what he did was 20 minutes time in front of an audience of a Stanford. He said you can pitch someone's product, not my product. Don't buy it. So he sold the time. So what is the strength of Stanford is the overall aura of Stanford. For India, the aura is spices. The India aura is curries. India aura is biryani, tikka. So think about a burger coming from India may not excite an average American, but an Indian curry, an Indian tikka, Indian biryani is as authentic as it gets. So the cultural tailwind is behind you when you are selling those products.
Can I add to that, right? I think, also, Abhishek, my very strong belief is, right? We're in the business of food, right? We talk to food entrepreneurs all the time, and we talk to all the formats, right? Be it warehousing, be it logistics, be it restauranting, QSR, the works, right?
Yeah.
My very strong belief is that, Indian founders in the food space have shied away from talking about the product, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you look at, for example, the technology landscape, if you look at the e-commerce landscape,
right?
You have players like, Sachin and Binny Bansal have been talked about, right?
Yes.
Kunal has been talked about. So there are like many more names that are there, right?
True.
But when you start talking about food, you know that the best dal makhani is available at a brand A, right? You wouldn't know who the genius behind that is, right? True. And that is a massive negative. I think food founders need to
come to the
build
forefront,
up, and I think they need to go onto multiple platforms and talk about what they're doing.
And this is where guys like you and Snackfax comes into the picture, because you are trying to highlight what is working and what is differentiated. So I think there's a massive opportunity, I think, for food players in India to leverage such opportunities, what you guys are also providing. And
I think for us, that reputation management is very important, right?
It's
so
very important.
Very firmly believe that more good is going to happen when you know the people behind.
And also, I do believe for sustainable returns, I think more investments needs to come into the space. Think about how much investment has gone into the IT sector, maybe the service sector, and how much has come into the food sector. It's always you need to incentivize the space, and it's much more sustainable. There are no risks associated, there are no downside associated with it. So obviously, I think more and more companies should be coming.
So Abhishek, I think you've brought me into a very interesting phase, right? And I think everybody in the startup ecosystem likes to talk about funding, right? You've been also one of the most funded players in the space, right? Tell us a little about that, right? I think you have some amazing investors, right? I think Sixth Sense is backing you, right? They have a knack for identifying data sets, right? I think pretty much everything that they are in, I think Sixth Sense has been doing a phenomenal job. I think they've been able to read the consumer space much better than a lot of other people.
Absolutely.
A little ahead of the curve, right? So
I think the best part, what distinguishes Sixth Sense from other investors, are not afraid to talk. They are always interested to explore. So Nikhil, Swati and the team, while others were not really very confident to speak to us, they kept themselves in the trenches during our discussion. We had too many to and fro, and eventually they go by the gut feel, as the name says, Sixth Sense. So if they feel that they could work, they do the diligence and they just go for it.
Interesting.
So they take those bets. So happy to have been a portfolio of company of Sixth Sense. So really happy.
But what's been the overall experience of raising funds, right? I mean, has that been difficult? Because food is an area which is just related with preconceived notions, right? How has the experience been for you in general?
So we were not really actively looking for fundraise because we wanted to,
I'm saying in general about the market.
About the market, I think it's tough. I think especially for food space. Very interestingly, I think the food space can be divided into two formats. Like what I feel. One is very clearly the QSR formats. Right. And I don't know, for reasons best known to investors, they are funded much better than manufacturing companies who may have technical moats. So anyone can
That's a very interesting point.
So anyone can open any store. If you have money, you can always scale up. But there is always, what's the moat is just the brand. And many Indian QSR may not have the adequate SOPs in place for a massive scale-ups. But for manufacturing, I think if the prototype is proven, the manufacturing scale-up is easier. So I do believe food is invested a lot in India, but mostly in the QSR space. Which is very visibly scalable.
I have a belief. So I think I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I have a belief that if you have a solid distribution play there, I think it automatically becomes easy for manufacturing companies, and I think that could be a portfolio approach for a lot of people, right? So that's probably how I see it, right? But no, I think a bunch of very interesting points, Abhishek. You're in a very interesting phase. I think India in general is in a very interesting phase. What are the next couple of years like, right? I mean,
so just keep riding on the affordable protein. What we are doing, mainstream it within India and outside of India, and essentially, as I said, we start with animals, we close with animals. It's all about animals. We are here at this moment of time in history to make the world a more compassionate place.
That's a lovely one.
By mainstreaming plant-based protein.
That is amazing. That's an outstanding one, and that's a great message. I think I'm going to take away that message, right? I think when you say that, right, I can relate with a lot of youngsters around us, right? The kids, they've become so much more sensitive, right? I can think of my daughter, for example, right? And how for example, what is happening organically, they're growing outside of meat
Yes.
eating, right? And that's
Yes.
that's beautiful, right? That's very
It's
subtle,
beautiful
but
for
it's
so many
beautiful to
things.
see.
It's beautiful for so many things.
It's amazing.
And then this is where industry need to prepare for these future
Right.
consumers.
Yeah.
You can't be dependent upon a legacy
I
consumer.
think these are very subtle trends. I don't think
It is
I don't think
happening,
they're
I
not
think.
getting tracked as much.
It's not getting tracked as much because
Yeah.
they are not the paying consumers as
Correct.
of now.
It
But you have
depends.
to prepare now for the future.
100%.
Right?
Absolutely. No, but
Yeah.
Abhishek, this has been an absolutely terrific conversation. I am so looking forward
Yeah.
to
Please
the
try it.
tikka and the curry. I think this is spectacular. The dhaba curry, right?
Yeah.
On mutton.
On mutton
That is
dhaba
just
curry.
so important, right? But
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks a ton for taking the time out. Look forward to catching up much sooner and
Absolutely.
seeing the brand take newer heights, right? Available across all the major hospitality players, not just in India, but globally, right?
Thank you.
And
Ashu.
thanks a ton. This was
Appreciate
a pleasure to have you
Pleasure
with us.
here, Mehta. Thank you so much.